Could we see a blockbuster trade between the Blue Jackets and the Sabres this offseason? We'll discuss how it might go down coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, of course, as we were talking about here today, we're looking at a trade where we're focusing on Jack Eichel and the Buffalo Sabres and a potential blockbuster deal that could see him move to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, of course, a little disclaimer here, as we know, Eichel's going to be a hot topic continuing into the offseason. No guarantees for sure that he's traded, but many NHL insiders do feel the odds are certainly much higher than they ever have been before, and there's going to be lots of teams pursuing him, so do not be surprised if we come across various reports in the next several weeks linking him to potentially many different teams and what the trade packages could be. We're really just discussing this just for fun purposes, just to kind of see what everybody thinks. And if you guys all feel that this is a deal that's realistic and should go down, let me know your comments down below here, and we'll discuss further what everybody thinks. But I do think there's a really good chance an Eichel trade could happen. We've looked at other teams before recently, most notably the Los Angeles Kings as being a potential destination for him. We've looked at a few other teams recently, including potentially the Rangers. Minnesota or Boston has been linked to him a little bit before as well. And as I mentioned, all of those teams to some degree have different packages and different things they can put together more than others. I think LA would be right at the top of the list, with the Rangers being a not too distant second. But Minnesota and Boston, even though there's a lot of things that make sense about the deal, not really sure that they have the necessary assets to put together a really intriguing package to make the deal for Buffalo be good enough to pull the trigger. Now, the latest reports we're seeing, and I'll post a link to it here in the pinned comment if you want to read the article, suggest the Columbus Blue Jackets could be a player for Eichel services. And again, like Boston and Minnesota, it does make a lot of sense. He's certainly the type of player that they're missing, as we've seen them do this past season. They traded Pierre-Luc Dubois, who was their top center, and they need to replace that. I mean, they got Patrick Laine, who's certainly had his ups and downs, and I think that there's a good chance we'll see head coach John Tortorella likely be replaced this offseason and get a fresh coach behind there who can work with his players and his team and change things enough to make guys like him have more success. But it's going to be difficult for Laine to have a lot of success and score a lot of goals if he doesn't have a top center who can feed him the puck on a regular basis to play with. And Eichel could very well be that guy. Having Eichel and Laine as part of your top tandem could be a huge boost here for the Columbus Blue Jackets. As we've talked about before in the last day's video as well yesterday, there's other things they have to consider. They're going to be a very busy team. Extending Seth Jones needs to be right at the top of the list, or possibly even moving either him or Werenski if they can't put together a package for a guy like Jack Eichel. Now, of course, let's take a look first, though, before we get into this any further, what the proposed package is going to Buffalo to see what everyone thinks. Now, of course, there would be multiple first-round picks. There would be 2 first-rounders included in this package here. They could do this in a variety of ways. The Columbus Blue Jackets actually now have 3 first-round picks this year. They could consider moving 2 out of those 3 to get the top center. I mean, I would be willing to consider that if I'm Jarmo Kekalainen. Maybe they move 1 this year and their pick next year. A lot of it's going to depend really on the Sabres and which of those picks they really want. They have to look at where they feel those teams will finish and see where things go from there. Having the Columbus pick would certainly be preferable, because obviously they'll be lower in the standings than the other ones they've acquired, which will be playoff teams. We don't know exactly how far those teams are going to go. But either way, 2 first-round picks, both in 21 or maybe 21 and 22, depending on how they break that up. We would also include top prospect Liam Foudy. I mean, Foudy at this point could still turn out to be, I think, a really solid NHL player. Not sure that he'll really ever live up to the kind of standards that Jack Eichel has set, but he still could be a really solid NHL player. He could still be a center as well. I mean, some peg him maybe more as a winger, and he very well could turn out to be that. But the guy's got incredible speed, great skater, and he's certainly working on kind of putting that rest of the package together to hopefully translate at the NHL level. Had a lot of success with the London Knights at the OHL level, and he would certainly be right at the top of the list. If you're making a deal with Columbus as far as getting some younger players involved, he would certainly be an intriguing one. And the other proposed option here is defenseman Andrew Peeke. Now, of course, they don't have a ton of really intriguing young defensemen, in my opinion. They could also push for a guy like Gavrikov to be included. I mean, obviously he might be a little bit more interesting. And also they would also put in a goaltender. So we're looking at 5 pieces. We know that they're looking for, at least 4 to 5 first-round quality assets. Now, of course, it could be Korpisalo or it could be Elvis Merzlikins. I think the Jackets would probably prefer to have Elvis in there. Myself, he is signed for another season as well. Decent contract. Both of them are good goaltenders. I think the Jackets would probably prefer to hang on to Korpisalo, but I guess we'll have to see. But we're looking at a total package here of 2 first-round picks, a decent goaltender in either Korpisalo or Elvis. You're looking at Liam Foudy, a top forward who could be a really solid center or winger to go with your other young players. And then, of course, you have a younger defenseman, an Andrew Peeke, who could still be a pretty solid NHL defenseman, like I said. Or if the Sabres really want to play hardball, I think they could push to have some of that upgraded. Like I said, maybe Peeke becomes Gavrikov. He's signed for multi-years now at, I think it was $2.5 million, so he's got a pretty decent contract, a little bit more established, still relatively young enough that he could still have an impact on the roster for an extended time. You get a goaltender, you get Foudy, and a couple of first-rounders. I mean, that is a pretty interesting package. However, if we compare that to some of the deals we've talked about before, especially like the Los Angeles Kings, who could include a forward such as Byfield or Turcotte or one of those guys, or Kupari, that would probably be a higher end talent than Liam Foudy. If you look at what the Kings could put in for a defenseman, they could throw in a guy like Cale Clegg, maybe a Sean Dursey, or some other guys that they have on the list like Bjornfoot, that would be a higher end defenseman. So you have some higher end players going now. You have the possibility of multiple first round picks as well. I mean, the Sabres might not get a goalie out of LA. They probably wouldn't be overly interested in Jonathan Quick. I mean, considering his age and injuries in the past, he probably wouldn't be the solution, at least not for very long. So that wouldn't really be there. And I can't see the Kings wanting to move on from Peterson. Obviously, they've already moved on from Jack Campbell not long ago. So to me, the Kings are going to be able to include some really interesting young players, higher end talent when it comes to the forward and defense positions, but not a goaltender. So that's something that the Jackets have that a lot of other teams don't. Now, when you come to the New York Rangers, as we talked about, they could do that. They could include a guy like Alexander Georgiev. Georgiev could very well be expendable here after, we've seen Igor Shesterkin basically, be capable here being a full-time starter. They can go different direction for backup. I know they've had Keith Kincaid there this year. I'm not sure how long of a solution he is, but irregardless, if they can get Eichel, giving up Georgiev and figuring out another backup position there would be fine. And they could also include a pretty high-end forward and a defenseman as well. Like I said, on the blue line, maybe they have to include a guy like Keandre Miller. Maybe it's Zach Jones. I don't know exactly who they put in there because there's a variety of options. In the forward position, I would think they would push for either Kakko or Lafreniere. I'm sure the Rangers would not want to do that, but if they really want Eichel bad enough, they just might have to. Maybe they go for a guy like Filipino, who's still relatively young. I'm not sure, but either way, I think the Rangers, in that respect, have enough talent to compete with the Columbus offer and, in fact, make it even more interesting and maybe even beat that offer as well. But the Sabres, if they're going to end up doing this deal and they get themselves a decent goalie for the future, a solid defenseman, a solid forward, ideally somebody who can play center, and a couple of first-round picks, that's a pretty good haul, and you're not going to really do much better than that, I think, for a superstar player. It's really hard to win those trades. It's almost impossible sometimes. It really boils down to what those future assets work out to be. As we've seen before, sometimes it's almost like it's really hard. But look at the Erik Karlsson trade, for example. I know Sens fans were really upset when it happened, and were probably feeling underwhelmed when it first happened as well. But now look at how a lot of those picks have worked out. I mean, they've gotten 2 of their top 6 forwards now with Josh Norris and Team Stützle from that trade. They've got other pieces like Chris Tierney, who's still contributing at the center ice position as well. They've already moved on from a few other of the pieces like DeMello and Balsers. And they have other picks in there from there as well. So, really, overall, if I'm not mistaken, I think the goalie that they have, the prospect they decided, Mads Sogard, I think was from one of the picks they got in that trade as well. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure. So, they got a really good haul there. And now that we're a few years removed and we know more about who these young players are, that's quite a haul. And I think long term, they've done quite well in that respect. And we've seen Karlsson struggle with San Jose and not really be at his best compared to the prime years he played in Ottawa. So, obviously, Eichel's a lot younger, but he's going through a difficult injury right now. Will the injury really impact him long term? It's difficult to say. I would think it's less likely given what it is, but you just never know how players' bodies will respond. But certainly it makes sense for Columbus, I think, to be big players this offseason. They're going to be a fascinating team to watch. I think we're going to see a lot of turnover. Like I said, they have other big question marks here, like maybe trading Zach Werenski. If they can't get a package like this together for a guy like Eichel, maybe they consider moving Werenski for another potential top center. Do they re-sign or extend Seth Jones? Will he want to do that? Will they want to do that? I'm sure they're interested, considering how strong of a blue liner he's been for them. They could move a goalie. Will Laine want to stay? Does Domi want to stay? Lots of things. Will they have a new head coach? Like, there's tons of things that are going to change with the Jackets organization. Just a matter of how things are going to go. So let me know your thoughts on this potential blockbuster deal that we could see between the Jackets and the Buffalo Sabres. Do the Jackets really have a good chance with this kind of package to push for this kind of trade, or are they going to be in too tough against some of the other teams that are likely, maybe putting together a more competitive offer, like the Rangers, potentially like the LA Kings? They could certainly compete with teams like Boston and Minnesota, in my opinion, but I want to know what everybody else thinks down there as well. What kind of thoughts on this trade? Can it happen? Can they get it done? We'll discuss in the comments and go from there. So if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and we'll keep you up to date with all the latest news from around the entire NHL. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.